Hi, everyone.
Hello.
As soon as you hear it.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thursday, October 3rd, 2024, City of Lacey Human Services Work Group. We're going to start tonight's meeting with a roll call. Please announce yourself if you are present. First, we have Dahlia Martinez. Dahlia is not here. Oh, nope. All right, James Broman.
Present.
Great. Juliet Lawson Hall. Thought we saw her in the meeting.
It says she's there.
Okay. Nancy Dela,
Here.
Nathaniel Clay,
Present.
Tiffany Walker,
Present.
and Brandon Stevens. Myself, I am here as well, present.
Yeah, we're a new member, El Haj.
And we do have a new member,
El Haj Toure. Is that right? How you say it? Toure?
and we will get to that here shortly. First, we will start our meeting with the land acknowledgement, and tonight we have a special reading of that by our own member, Nancy Dela.
We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Indian Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allow our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, and next we'll move to item number 4, the approval of the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items. Do I have a motion to approve that?
I motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Awesome. Those are seconded and approved, the approval of the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items. Is there anybody online or inside for public comment at this time?
Sure, if I could. You still need to take a vote for your first and your second.
We will do that first. Let me back up. And for the approval, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, so now we are officially approved for the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items. And now, is there anybody here for public comment online or in the building? No? Okay, well, that'll bring us up to business items, and from there, we will move over to the introduction to new Lacey Youth Council and Representative El Haj Toure from Sadie Siglin.
Yes.
All right, our management analyst here at the City of Lacey.
Yes. Well, hello. It's nice to be here. This is my first time getting to meet with this work group. My
Yes.
name is Sadie Siglin. I'm the management analyst in the city manager's office. And one of the things I do is serve as the staff liaison for the Lacey Youth Council. And you all tonight have a new member with you who is your Lacey Youth Council Advisory Board representative. But what I wanted to do before introducing him is kind of review what the Youth Council is and what we do and how that correlates with the Human Services Work Group, because you are a new group and this is the first term that you've had a Lacey Youth Council Advisory Board representative. So rearrange without closing any. I didn't. The Lacey Youth Council is an advisory board to the Lacey City Council, similar to this group. that is consistent of up to 15 youth members from the Lacey area. So sophomores, juniors, or seniors who are part of Lacey public, private, or homeschool student bodies are eligible to serve on the youth council. And they are with us for the school year. So their advisory board terms start in September when they do their orientation and go through the end of the school year through June. So they are able to serve 3 consecutive terms and come back each year if they wish. And they, similar to our other advisory bodies, have to apply and be approved by the mayor and the Lacey City Council. So they are set up to mirror our other advisory bodies, but one unique thing about them is they also slightly mirror the city council. So they have a youth mayor, a youth deputy mayor, and a clerk. They take meeting minutes and they conduct business and have agendas and also do the land acknowledgement and things that all of our other advisory bodies do at the city of Lacey. This year, we also added a social media coordinator role. The Lacey Youth Council has their own Instagram and is working with the City of Lacey's public affairs team to see how we can improve communications and get them to youth. Because as we are all probably aware, the way we receive, absorb, and interpret information is very different. So that's a position that we've added this year to try to get that two-way communication through social media. And then another thing the youth council does is have representatives to advisory boards, including this body, the Commission on Equity, the Library Board, the Historical Commission, and the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Board, in addition to this Human Services Work Group, all have youth representatives on them. So in addition to attending their 2 meetings a month as youth council members, these advisory board reps come to meetings. They're able to vote and participate and give feedback to the advisory bodies, just as you all do as advisory board members. So with that, they come, they attend, they participate, and then they take the information they hear and learn here back to the youth council and do a report to them and say, this month, this work group worked on this. This is what's going on. And they can get feedback to bring back to you. Do you have any concerns on this topic or feedback or ideas? So it's a very collaborative way that we can all work together, even though we can't all necessarily be in the same meetings every day, all day at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's been a very successful group. They meet twice a month on the first and third Tuesday of each month to conduct business. And one of those meetings afterward, they report to the Lacey City Council. So one representative from each school gives a report to the city council about what's going on in their school, what they're experiencing. Is it homecoming week? Are they having a food drive? Did maybe they have some concerns or an assembly that they want to share their thoughts, feelings with the council? And then they also give an update to the council as to what they've been working on as a group that month. So one member will say, hey, this month youth council learned about this, or updated that, or participated in this community event, so that the council and the community can be updated on what they're doing as well. They also do joint work sessions. Currently, they do a work session jointly with the Lacey City Council once a term and the Commission on Equity, where they're all able to get together, give feedback, get updates, ask questions, and work collaboratively. So that is something they really look forward to every year, as does the council and the Commission on Equity. The nice thing about having that youth voice is they give us information about addressing youth-specific concerns in the community, because they make up a very large majority of Lacey's population. And one thing the city identified is making sure everyone is represented, including youth. So that's really added that in. They also have the opportunity to work with city staff, similar to presentations you all receive or information that you will get on this board and other boards. They have city staff members come in and talk. They are able to give feedback on things like the comprehensive plan. They're able to participate and give feedback on things like the advisory board stipend program, and we're actually a key group in identifying how beneficial that stipend could be to expanding participation and accessibility to even serve on these boards. They also give feedback on things like the public comment policy and recommendations for projects like our public art project, where we want to hear what kind of things do you want to see highlighted in Lacey? So they really give a lot of variety of feedback really to the city, and we're able to give them information and ask them, hey, the city's working on this. How can we get this out to the community? What is the best channel? Do you even know this is going on? And vice versa. They're able to say, hey, did you know that this happened at our school this week? Because we often don't, because we're not in the schools anymore. So it's a really great two-way communication avenue. One thing that we try to do is kind of tailor each term based on each cohort's concerns and goals. This year is the first year we've had 15 full students on a youth council. So we have a very large, diverse group with very different concerns than what last year's group does. So during the application process and our orientation, we're able to ask, what are your concerns and how can we help teach you, on top of giving them the civic engagement of what the city does, how it operates, how can we give you information? So this is an example of taking last year's cohort's concerns and kind of mapping out and helping them visualize how do all of these things work together? What are kind of some key themes? So you can see last year they had identified health, equity, environment, safety, and school-related concerns. And from that, we are able to bring in staff and resources to teach them the city's relationship with the school district. As an example, last year, the school district was able to come in and talk with them and talk about how school governance and city governance are different. So we're really able to tailor their experience to each group. And then also each year, different things occur. This year, we have the opportunity to have somebody help with the human services work group. So that's a new opportunity that we didn't have last year. So it's always evolving and changing to what's going on that time for that. Another big thing the youth council does is do community engagement events to get information back. Up here, we have some pictures. Last year, the Lacey Youth Council hosted the very first Youth Summit and Resource Fair, which was a free event for youth where they could come. We had keynote speakers talk to them. Last year's Youth Council identified communication, especially in hard situations, as something they wanted to learn about. So we had a speaker come and do tips and tricks on how to communicate in hard situations or hard conversations. We had a resource fair with resources from throughout the community and the city, so youth could learn about what resources are available for them, how to get there. Our human resources department partnered and did resume review and was available to help set up online job web pages and LinkedIn. And they did free headshots, so students could get a headshot taken to use for college applications, resumes, and things. And then connect with other youth councils and youth in the area who they may not see at their school. So that was a pretty big accomplishment for such a new and young group to be able to deliver such a good resource to the community. And that's something they plan to do every year. They also went the last few years to the Lacey Spring Fun Fair to do some community engagement and ask questions. Over here, last year they did a board where they asked people to give feedback on what's your concern as a youth or for youth specifically in this community. And they're able to collect information, talk to the community and hear what kinds of concerns they have and how they can help. And they're able to take this and bring it back to the city council and other boards as well and say, hey, we heard specifically from youth, this is what our concerns on. We think we can help or would like to address these issues. So it really builds that engagement opportunity for youth to connect with each other, because sometimes you, as a youth, don't want to go to an adult or coming to City Hall to talk to the council could be really intimidating, or they may not even know how or the best process to do that. So we're able to teach them how the city operates, where to go, and then help give them information that they're interested in and about what's going on that they may not know about. So that's at a very high level what we're doing. And this year, as I mentioned, is the first opportunity we have had to have a youth council representative on this work group. So
This is our first work group, so. We're
yes.
super excited and for that.
I was talking to El Hodge, we did an orientation, just a brief orientation, before the meeting, and I think this is our 5th meeting.
Yeah,
So it's a relatively new group, and the amount of work that you guys have accomplished in such a short time is amazing. And I wanted to welcome you, and we're glad to have you in the group. And I just want to compliment the city of Lacey on
Yeah.
the youth council. This is my 3rd jurisdiction, and I've never seen anything like
Yeah.
this. It's a robust, it's integrated into city policy, it's integrated into all of our boards and commissions. You watch council, you see the students present. So I couldn't be a bigger fan of the youth council. I think it's
Yeah.
amazing.
I would echo that. Absolutely. Hats off to the city of Lacey for having the youth be involved and really hats off to you, Haj. I mean, that looks like quite the responsibility on top of all the other things I'm sure you already have going on with school or however you may have it. And then also it's really important for youth to be involved, and it just goes to show like the real impacts happen at the local and community level. And that's how you really make a difference in this world. So, you know, as you're already jumping into that, I think it's a bright future, and I would really look forward to the youth taking over. That's our goal, right? Is what we want to leave you guys, and you guys have to take the reins, because at some point it's like, get out of here, we'll take it from here. You know what I mean? So we're happy to have you. And I don't know, Nancy, did you have any comments on that?
Well, actually, I was at the city council meeting when we were introduced or affirmed, right? And the youth commission was there, that group last year. It was very inspiring. And just listening to them and seeing the confidence that they've gained as a part of the process is really valuable. And this will hold you in good stead through life. So you'll get a lot of it out of it now, and the city gets a lot out of you being involved, but it will lay a foundation for the future that will really be good for you.
And this work group is really incredible as well, because one of your work group members is a former Lacey Youth Council member.
That's right.
Actually has graduated and decided to come back and continue his service with the city of Lacey. So that's pretty incredible too, to have somebody who participated and then is able to carry that through
Yeah.
and continue the impact. So we're very excited.
We're lucky to have them here. Absolutely.
So El Hatch will be here through June for the rest of the year at all of your meetings, whether he's here in person or virtually attending, but you will be able to.
So do you go to a school? Are you homeschool, a private school? Which one? River Ridge, okay. Went there, 1999. We used to say Whoop River Ridge. Now, if you go Google that, there was a song back then. There it is, but now it's Whoop River Ridge, okay? All
So
right.
that's great.
Anything else, Sadie, or?
No, that is it.
Thank you so
for
much.
us,
Yeah.
and we're looking forward to always having the opportunity to collaborate, and you will have a youth voice here. So any opportunities, he's here to help assist just as a normal work group member. So thank you.
Awesome. All right, great. So that'll take Shannon? No? Okay.
Nope,
You good?
all good over here.
All right, so next up we have Michelle Chavez, our Human Services Coordinator. She's gonna give us a Human Services Grant Program material review. I'll grab it.
I knew there was a reason you were the chair.
All right, Michelle, you're up. Sadie?
Thank you.
So the first item to talk about today is our kind of our human services grant program. And you all have a staff report in front of you that talks about kind of, we wanted to reconnect with the group and talk about three items, our policies, our grant application and our scoring rubric. Cause I've heard back from the readers and the people who've been involved with the program, and I've also heard back from some of the applicants on some of their concerns, and so I wanted to give the group an opportunity
Love to hear that.
to go over these three work pieces, starting out with the policies. And so what I have up at the screen here is our human services grant policy. And we talked about the best way to go about this, because we don't have that needs assessment done, so we have the priority areas, which I thought worked good in terms of housing security and survival. But how does the work group feel about how the prioritizing these areas worked out with the policy? Do you feel like it was a good way to go about doing it, or too broad, too narrow?
Nancy, did you have anything in particular, or anybody? James, Nathaniel, I don't know if Tiffany's still up there.
I'm still here.
Oh, hey Tiffany.
Hey, I didn't have an issue with the way it was done. I can't remember exactly what I said in the last meeting, but I would just echo those comments.
Well,
I-
so, go ahead.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I really have a sore throat, so
Oh, no.
it doesn't always.
We hope you
Yeah.
feel better.
Sorry, I don't have any issues either with the process. It went well.
For me, like, because we didn't have anything else to go off of, and we had some limited funds and they had to be very specific, I felt like this was a good starting point. It did help when we were looking at the applications to kind of prioritize the funds, because there were some in there that were roughly in the area of, I mean, they all could have been in that, but there was some that were more roughly in the framework of them, if that makes sense. So that did help us with some, when you have specific things like housing survival, when survival could be very broad, but if you narrow it down to access to food, water, shelter, sleep, and clothing, that's helpful for us as a group. But I do think that it would be important for us to get feedback from the community on exactly what they want, because that would be more important.
And that's through this process. I handed out for you
Yes.
guys, this survey is open, the Human Services Needs Survey is open through October 18th. And we want y'all to take it and have your friends and family take it and your colleagues at work. And as we gather more information, like we're gonna be doing focus groups in the community, these priorities will be adapted. And so through our strategic planning process, like I wanna do a focus group with the youth council and get their feedback and lots of different sectors of the community, so that when we go back and formulate our recommendation to council, we might change, the priorities might change. But for right now, we just started with a basic needs framework.
Was there any specific feedback from the applicants on this particular portion of it, or?
Not really in this particular portion. One thing I did hear is that perhaps we would limit the amount of
Funds.
applicant, that is one piece, and we're gonna get to that. But that we would limit the amount of, people that could apply for certain areas. But I think that would get difficult. So like only this many can apply for housing, or only this many for survival. So we left it open. You could say, cause my program serves all three. But that just helps when people are making policy decisions and you all are making your decisions. You could see, okay, there were 10 groups that addressed this. There were 12 groups, so that was more helping us put the framework around it for the larger big picture. So we didn't limit it to how many people could apply for each area.
I know that we made an attempt, and if this isn't the area that you want to talk about this, just stall me, okay?
Sure.
But we made an attempt, it was difficult to compare some of the small, very small, fledgling little groups. They didn't compete at all with the ones that have multiple grant writing experiences and people. And I don't know if there's a way to separate that out. Could we look at like two groups and this group could be, geared for smaller grants or I don't know if it's grants by size or grants by service. I don't know quite what it is, but it seemed that the smaller groups had a really hard time competing just because they didn't have the level of professionalism attached to them.
That transitions nice into the next section, because that is one of the questions that we have is how do we, reach more different size agencies? One of the things we could look at is, we did not have a maximum award for human services type projects. We had a maximum for brick and mortar.
Right.
It's a possibility that if we change the policy parameters, we've made a recommendation, again, the council has the final say, that we may get more, that may spread more opportunity to some of the smaller agencies. We did have some fairly large asks, which when you have a fairly large ask with a very large agency that has a lot of, like you said, professional grant writers, things like that, that can make it a challenge for smaller agencies to fit into that pot. So one thing we could look at is, I liked your idea of having, different size agencies apply for different size pots. We could think about that. We could also think about having a cap on human service applications. So say like brick and mortar, 50,000 max. That's something we could look at. Other things, anybody online have different ideas about how to reach a larger group?
Member Walker has their hand raised.
Oh, Tiffany?
Tiffany.
So I've had my hand up a couple times. I just been kind of trying to be patient and wait for you guys.
We're not
I
looking very, sorry, we'll make
It's
sure.
okay, no
Okay.
worries. I agree with the needs assessment. We definitely need a needs assessment to see what the actual community is needing and wanting. So I wanted to comment on that part of this. In regards to the grant writing, I'm gonna say that I am from a bigger agency that's nonprofit, and we don't have professional grant writers. Our development director and our deputy director, who are they're there to keep the flow of the nonprofit running smoothly. With the executive director, they're the ones who write our grant request, and they spend hours doing it. It's not like they're not professional. They just have learned over time how to critique the grant requests and the writing that they're doing. So I wouldn't say that all the big agencies that applied for the grant have actual grant writers that are doing that writing for them. So I just wanted to put that comment in there. And I do agree with separating the pots of money to some of the agencies so that the smaller agencies also have more of a fighting chance to get some of those funds to be able to help serve the people that they are serving and the communities that they're serving. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, potentially earmarking a small portion for groups that don't exceed a certain size of maybe, I don't know what they call them, if they're employees or have a certain budget. That might be something that we could put in there. If it's 300,000 and maybe we took 20% of that or something like that, or the smaller agencies, could be something to consider. Obviously, Tiffany, you have a lot more experience in that, so thank you for your feedback, absolutely, on that.
Yeah, no problem. I also don't think that we should say that certain people can't apply, because that's not how grants are, how it works. If it's open, it's open to all. That's the
What do you
other
mean,
thing.
though? Did we have something on there that said they couldn't apply,
No,
or?
no. I was just making, there was a comment about, I believe there was a comment about making not allowing certain size people or people who have certain grant writers or professional grant writers apply. I just don't think that we should limit that. I just think that we should set money aside for the smaller agencies or for the ones that, or you know what I mean? Just like you said, just
Yeah.
a pot of money aside for those. I don't think we should
Yeah.
disclude anybody from applying. Doesn't mean
So-
that we have to accept their grant request.
Absolutely. Nancy?
Tiffany, this is Nancy. I just want to clarify that That was not what I intended to say. And I don't want that to be on the record that that's what I said. I think everybody deserves a chance, but I think there has to be a better way to both acknowledge the groups that have people that spend time writing them and those that either are written by a volunteer staff member or a volunteer director or whatever. There has to be a better way to be equitable there, and I think there's good need on both sides. It's just the presentation wasn't nearly as strong by the volunteer groups because they're just getting started doing this kind of stuff.
True. And I do agree with the equitable part at 100%.
For me, it was more the rubric was what really, when it came down to it, we allotted funds based on a rubric score. Now I don't know if the people that didn't reach that certain score, was it because of the way they wrote the rubric? Not meeting the criteria? Or was it because it didn't actually meet that process at all? But what I'm really meaning is like, was it inexperience? Not being a smaller agency and having to do all that themselves, or was it not necessarily a professional grant writer for applications, but someone that has more experience and knows how to fill it in? I think that's what you're saying, right, Nancy? Yeah. So I wonder if that didn't play a part on some people not getting some funds, just having inexperience in that. And I don't know how we make that
So
happen.
I didn't personally do my scoring based on inexperience. I did it based on what was presented, what was presented in the
know.
applications, and then, but I went more off of their actual presentation,
Yeah,
what they were providing to the community, what
Yeah.
type of services they provide, what they would do that would be beneficial for the community with the money that it was allocated to them. So that's how I did my scoring. I didn't base it off of all of that inexperience or big versus small. I really truly based my scoring off of the presentations.
Well, there were certain questions in there, like it asked specifically, how many residents of Lacey will you be servicing?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, you had to go back to the application for that. Yes.
yeah, and on the rubric, right? But some people didn't have an answer to that,
That is
which
true.
hurt them.
So-
And yeah,
I just wanted to mention one thing. Jim has his hand up. And so this is the policy part that we're gonna go over. I also have the application and the rubric on the
Okay.
agenda.
sorry.
So, no, I love the conversation and I want you guys to speak whatever comes to mind. But I just wanna say, we are gonna get to the application hopefully and the rubric.
Okay, Jim, sorry to leave you hanging up there.
Yes, two comments. First of all, with regard to the person who prepares the grant request, whether they're a professional or volunteer, whether it's their first time or their 10th time, is not necessarily an indicator of how well the application will be completed. There are people who have those skills, people who don't. And so I think it would be risky to try to make some type of judgment based on the experience or those types of things. I would prefer that we invested some time and money in training for the people who will be applying to help them be better prepared and organized when the grant application hits the streets. This, I think
Oh, I
that
love that. That's a
Yeah,
great
that's
idea.
the best way to level the playing field.
I would like to make a comment that we did offer an application workshop in the summer. We had one attendee in person and that person ranked, they came in first in the rubric and the scoring.
Did anybody watch? Can I speak?
Nancy?
Did
Thanks, Jim.
anybody watch it? Can you?
I could probably go back and see how many views we've had, but I have no idea of knowing who those people were. But
So
I
there's
think it's amazing that the person who came actually scored the highest. That's pretty cool. Maybe think about possibly implementing a policy where they have to
well,
come to a workshop on what you're looking for.
Well, we have limited resources and time for us to be able to, we can't really handhold people on the application so much. I don't think that would be, we can certainly do the best we can to make everybody have an equitable stake in that application, but you can only do so much. And if we offer something like that, that's pretty outstanding already. So.
So I've heard from applicants similar things like another thing I've heard is that do we allow multiple applicants? That was a concern. We didn't limit the amount of applications per agency.
Right.
So an agency could apply for more than one. One way to look at spreading the dollars farther is to allow one application per agency. That's something we could look at, or I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't think it's up any longer.
Okay.
I think that's fair. Because I seen, Together had 2 applications. And I think there was one other one.
Yeah. Yeah, but they were like 2 separate programs, right?
Yeah.
Right, but the grant is only so big and can only go so
Oh.
far.
Especially
So-
this time around is,
Yeah. So limiting them on how many applications they can submit per agency, I think is a great idea.
yeah.
I agree. 1 per agency.
And I agree with that as well.
I think that, it sounds like there's a consensus on that from this group at least, of course. You guys may-
Is that how I say your name?
Yes.
What do you think?
So I obviously wasn't here for like the applications and stuff like that, but going on what you said earlier about that we can't like handhold people throughout the application process. I do think that maybe providing like a virtual option instead of like in person would make it so that it's more accessible for people who maybe don't have the time to come for a workshop to improve their grant application.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to give you some backgrounds, you're new, this is your first meeting, but what we're kind of discussing here is we had $1.1 million in requests for funding. We only had $300,000 to distribute. That made it really difficult for the folks on this advisory board to make recommendations. We did give them tools, we had this rubric, and we had an application process, and we had a workshop, which was a training for people to apply. But even with all of that, there's some challenges, and so we're just kind of opening up to get feedback from the group because we were hearing from the community, we're hearing from different folks. What could we do to improve the program, improve the application process, and then the scoring rubric? Because it's a good problem to have, but that's a big ask and a small pot of money. So what can we do to help make it easier on our work group members and also easier for the community to participate? So that gives you a background.
I think too, what I heard was that the interest was in making sure that things like our workshop were also available virtually so that
Yes.
people could go to it. And that is a really good point of having that accessibility and reaching people where they are. And
Mhm.
Michelle did do a good job of that. So that was
Yeah.
offered. You could attend online. You could also attend in person and you could watch. It's up on our website. And so you can watch it after the fact whenever you have time. But I think it is a really good point of, trying to make sure that we are being accessible to individuals when they have the time. And Michelle did a really good job of that with this cycle, but it's a good point.
Tiffany?
I was just gonna say, or you, instead of doing a workshop or a virtual workshop, maybe put together a PowerPoint. That helps too.
That was probably on the virtual.
Yeah, we did have a PowerPoint on that.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. You guys already did that. That's what I would do.
There's been
You
some.
already did everything.
And we will continue to do that, and we wanna just make it as accessible and open as possible to try to get participation. So I think that's a lot of great feedback, and I wanna continue just quickly through this policy piece.
Michelle, if I could just for 1 second, I think one question that I still want to hear a little bit from the work group. And again, thank you all. You're all giving us some really good feedback to take and consider. And as we work through the human, services needs assessment, when we bring it back up, this will certainly be something that comes back before, this group or potentially the Human Services Commission pending council direction and council. One thing I was still wanting to hear more on is the maximum of 50,000 for capital brick and mortar projects. Michelle also brought up the possibility of establishing some sort of similar cap for service projects. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more feedback from your perspectives on that topic.
I don't want to speak first always, but I honestly was a little taken aback when I looked at the applications and one application was for all of it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm gonna
So
say I'm all for having projects, like you have a cap on stuff. I have a cap on, I finally got the county to do a cap on rental arrears, that because we were paying $30,000 and $40,000 in rental arrears and the money was just getting eaten up. So I'm all for the capping it.
And I don't blame those agencies for trying to take it all because they need those funds to operate. But I was also like, well, we can't possibly give all our funds to just one agency. That was what I was thinking. And so, you know, we were gonna come and talk about that together as a work group, but that would have been something I would have said had we not just done that. Right?
I think a cap will depend on the amount of funds that is available. If we are to limit it to 15 to 50,000, for instance, and next year we have 1 million, I don't think we should restrict the building funding because some of their requests, there is a genuine need for let's say 150, a quarter of a million, 300,000. So it depends on the amount of funds that the city of Lacey has at its disposal.
Yeah, so we may need to wait for that information before we can make that type of decision on the caps on funding, but for the group here. But Tiffany?
I was just gonna say funding amounts can change every year. And at that time, you go through your admin guidelines and the policies that you guys have set forth in the work group and you amend those when that time comes. But like if we know that in the pipeline, we're gonna have 300,000 or 350,000 next year, we can go ahead and set that cap now.
Shannon, did you get the answer that you were looking for?
It sounds like there is interest in a cap and it depends on, you know, funding in the future. And so we'll come back for future and again, purpose of today is, hey, we're collecting information so we can come back in the future. So thank you.
Absolutely. Julia?
One thought I had as I was reviewing the applications, I noticed, and in the presentations as well, some applicants indicated that they received money from the city of Lacey, let's say in May and in January and so on. Whereas some organizations have never received anything. So I am wondering if for some funding, there will be criterias that say, for instance, if you have been a recipient of a financial award within X time period, you are not eligible to apply. Can we put something like that? As we're talking about equity and the distribution of funding and ensuring that money gets around to small and large organizations.
So limiting a cap on how many grants you can receive in a year?
Yes. Or however number, whatever threshold
Or
we
a
want,
dollar amount?
we can say within the last 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever. But I think that would address a lot of the equity issues.
But Julia, what if these people these nonprofits or these agencies are getting funding from the city of Lacey for other projects? You're preventing them from funding other projects that can help the community, you know? And I just don't think that's equity right there.
Well, if some of them, right, like some of the agencies are government agencies and they do receive, I would imagine, budgetary allocation from the city of Lacey. I am not talking about those agencies. I am talking about, because I saw some individuals who mentioned that they had received multiple funding. So if I were a small nonprofit owner, business owner, I would say, well, it's the same set of organizations getting funding each and every year, or they are getting multiple funding within 1 year. If it's a government nonprofit agency or a public service like a public library system or something like that, that's a different thing altogether. I'm not talking about those.
But Family Support Center gets multiple grants each year, but we fund multiple different resources. We have multiple different rapid rehousing programs. We have eviction prevention. We have one-time rent assistance, one-time utility assistance, and so does Interfaith. So does Together. And so you're saying because we get multiple funding
But
sources
what
in a year. Hold on. I let you talk. In a year, you're saying that we should be limited to getting that.
Tiffany, Juliet,
I'm not talking about
Tiffany,
family
one second,
services.
please.
That for me would fall into the
Yeah.
category of
I think,
a government non-profit organization. Am I right or wrong? I don't know. If
Juliet,
it's not, yeah,
Tiffany, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yeah.
I heard you, Brandon.
Yeah, we're good.
I heard you. We're moving on. I got it.
Yeah, and Nancy wanted to say something. I respect the spirited conversation. I hear what you're saying. We might have, I think that's probably something we'd have to come back to, on that particular topic anyway. Because it sounds like there's more to be discussed on that. And thank you for raising those concerns, both of you. Nancy?
The only thing I wanted to say is, I wonder if, there might be some openness to revisiting, the capital portion of it. $50,000 is almost nothing in a capital project. And I wonder if we could do, and I'm just throwing out potential ideas. 1 year is capital projects and the next year is program specific. And that would allow for a little bit larger amount to work with. And it seems to me that that would also help us a little bit with the way the flow of who would apply and who would be selected for the process.
Yeah, I do think that that's all gonna depend on the budget,
Mhm.
right? On where these caps are. Julia, did you have any further comments or? Huh? Or, Dahlia, actually Dahlia has her hand raised. Sorry, Juliet.
Mhm.
I don't know if we already went over, wait, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if we went over this already. Are the programs that applied for this, like, are we preventing them from applying next year? Or if they've already applied for this year, they can still apply for next year?
Well, right now, we don't have any restrictions on that.
Okay, that was my
But
question.
that was basically what we were discussing essentially, was whether or not we should limit that, per, I guess, either like fiscal or calendar year. I don't know exactly how it would be done here. So,
And I just want to compliment everyone that your feedback is important.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all valid and I like all the different varying opinions that I'm hearing. And we are gonna take your feedback back and, rehash it, look at different options. How can we do, like, we show you different options and say, here's what we heard. And I want to share with you what I'm hearing from the applicants as well,
yeah,
so that you hear
thanks.
feedback we're getting. So thank you so much for all of your feedback
Yeah,
on this.
thank you so much. Thanks for engaging.
And I do want to keep moving forward on the policy piece because we have a lot to get to. And the other piece I wanted to point out was with the requirements. This gets into how we have to have eligibility requirements. We can't have, I can't think of a giant corporation applying, but it's nonprofits that are eligible, right? They don't need to be physically located in Lacey. However, if it's a capital project, they do need to have that building, that physical brick and mortar be in Lacey. They must adhere to city regs and rules of discrimination policies, things like that. Now, this is something I heard, that limiting the applications per cycle might be a change. Nothing is set in stone. Again, council has final policy, but I've heard capital projects, maybe switching service one year, capital the next. Service, maybe having a cap for the future. We'll talk about that. We don't know what our budget's gonna be. So again, a really good point that you all made was it's hard to make a decision on the maximum cap and we don't know how much our funding, but I do believe our funding is kind of anticipated to be around the similar amount if
That's
we
what
get funded. Just like with CDBG, you know, that's typically doesn't change radically. So one year we might get 300, the next year, unless we have like a pandemic where we get a whole inflection of federal funds, it tends to stay around the same point. And then partial funding, we've always decided that if the way to spread more money would be to say, we're not just gonna fund 100% the top 2 applicants, right? We wanna say partial funding's okay. So when you guys decided on option 2 for the council, we said 30,000 to everybody. And then whatever was left, I think it was like $8,000 to what was left over to the lowest, the next highest scoring application. So do you feel like this is reasonable, you know, like I'm hearing you all that these are the options we'll look at in the future, possibly changing some of the policies and to allow for more inclusion and to allow more folks who maybe didn't get funded this time to get funded in the future, or changing the way we, you know, have the cycle so that we might get more participation.
Nancy?
I think, Michelle, we asked how people knew about it and it had been, the application, the grant had been announced in the state or county, city information. I think word of mouth is gonna spread it and we'll have more next time. But I think we really have to tighten up what we're asking for and what we're expecting in order for it to really be successful. Not just more people, but more people filling an application that is really a good application.
Thanks, Nancy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that you guys mentioned that there was $1.1 million that was requested, but how many like actual nonprofits applied?
16.
Yeah. So.
There were 16 applications from 15 groups. So we did allow more than one application, so that's why we were talking about that tonight. We might change that in the future, we don't know, but we did allow more than one application and there was no cap on the service applications. So some folks were very conservative in their ask depending on their needs, and some folks asked for a larger amount because they had a higher need. And then these are just not eligible. This is pretty standard for government grants, you know, for-profit political groups, routine maintenance, capital projects outside the city, religious activities, and then projects that don't meet the city's non-discrimination policies. Those were our requirements. Final thoughts on the policy. I think we got a lot of great feedback.
I think we gave you our final thoughts.
And that's why we have the group, because we want that community
I
oversight.
love it. No, it was such a great session of feedback from our group. That was awesome.
Okay, I wanted to move to the application. So this is what I took, this was online through the Smart Sheets application that the city of Lacey uses. And this is just, I took a PDF and I dumped it into Word, so it doesn't look exactly like you saw when you did your reading. But what was the general overall feeling of the application? Were folks pleased with them? Did they like the way they turned out?
Are you talking about us as the group? Or?
Yes. As the readers, as the reviewers, did you feel like you had enough information to make decisions?
Can I say something?
Nancy?
I will be honest and tell you, I didn't allow enough time. The process when we go to score it is very time consuming if you give it the time that it deserves. And I did not allow enough time, so I would manage that differently myself. But I think the tool was really good. It just was overwhelming to try and review that many and be fair to everybody equally. You know, you do good on the first one, but by the 14th and 15th one, you're just trying to get finished, right? And that's not fair to that group. So for me, the process was fine. It was just the scoring that was very, very, very time consuming.
Yeah, I'm worried if it would be any more in depth, we would be reading applications for weeks. So there has to be some expedited way to do it that's a little more condensed, and this seems to work fine. I don't know that I had any negative feedback for it. Per se.
What about folks online? Do they?
Did anybody else have any feedback? Dahlia, Nathaniel, Jim, Tiffany, Juliet, about the actual application? No?
I liked the application. I can see what she was saying about how it is time consuming. And how that could be a problem because I felt that way, but at the end of the day, it's a personal problem. Like us being on the, you know, on this committee makes us responsible to, you know, make time for it, which is something, I mean, I struggled with, which is on me. So I think the application was good. For me, I just need to be better about time management. So that way it's fair for everybody, you know, who are asking of us to be fair, I guess.
Michelle,
Yeah,
you were.
I did.
Oh, Juliet. Okay, great, thanks. Juliet?
As I was scoring, one thing I wished was that a certain part of it was a collective process. What I mean is, okay, we had 300,000, and if we identified, let's say, 8 of those groups to receive funding, who makes the final decision in terms of how much goes to each agency? There was no field on the application form for us to make any recommendation. And I just kind of felt it would have been great to have a discussion about it.
Like, you mean on the rubric, like a field that said,
Yeah, yeah.
I recommend give them 30, something like that?
Okay, how will you determine if we all rated 10 of them highly? How will you determine what percentage of the fund goes to each group? Especially if those 10, for instance, requested between 50,000 and 100,000. I was just wondering.
Not yet.
We did, Juliet, were you at the last works group meeting?
No, I wasn't.
Did you have a chance to watch the recording?
Unfortunately, I didn't either. I'll
Okay.
go back and watch if it was discussed. That's
Yes,
fine.
we did. We had 5 different options discussed. And then
Okay.
the work group picked option number 2. And so there was a tool where you looked at different pots of money and how to divide it. And then the group looked at the different choices and then they determined based on what we recommended and what the group had seen.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you can go back and watch that and I really
That's
appreciate your
awesome.
feedback.
And I'm glad it was done. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Michelle, you were primarily responsible for putting this together, right? Yeah.
With Shannon's help
I think, yeah.
and your all help and the equity commission.
Yeah, I would be okay with just how that process is and right now, personally, and if there was something that you felt you needed to add in there that you would just come and address the group or,
And we would run the application by the group
Yeah.
again, so it'd be an ongoing process of here. I don't see it expanding,
yeah.
but if there was anything that was really cumbersome or annoying or disturbing about the process. I wanted to know about it because there's things we could tweak to make the process easier for folks.
No,
One thing that I wanna do is put, how much are you applying for right at the front?
oh, yeah, that, right.
Yeah, so
Hey,
that's.
do you guys mind if I chime in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So one thing I would like to add into it is very overwhelming, but it comes down to time management, like Dahlia said. And however, one thing we could that I would ask is maybe not include every single document regarding the board members, the IRS reports and all that type of stuff. We don't need to see that. We need to see the core applications and the presentations on what we're scoring. I think that some of that paperwork was a little too busy, and some people who don't have experience in reading some of those documents would think that like this is just a little overwhelming and not know what to do or how to understand what is being presented to them. So that was what I wanted to say about that. And then I also didn't see anywhere in the application where it talked about if you've had any type of like any type of fraudulent claims or anything against your agency or any type of like um legal issues. And if there's how are we doing checks and balances for that when we distribute the funds? Is the city of Lacey checking that before they do that? Because I know that in the past, like even during COVID, there was concerns of misappropriation of funds from some agencies.
And we did ask a question about auditing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did see the
And so-
auditing, but I was just wondering, like, but I
The
did see
legal
that.
question that could be a little bit different than a financial. That would come out.
Is that something, I think Tiffany's point is really good. Is that something that would come out in the preliminary to the application? Do you pre-screen any of that?
Well, part of the supplementals is to flag things. So like we asked for their tax.
Yeah.
I get your point on the tax document and I agree that perhaps we can cut down on the amount of supplementals. I just went with best practices, what other communities.
No, I still think you should collect it. But for us as the work group reviewing the stuff, I think that you shouldn't provide that to all of us. I think that all we really need to
Right.
see is the applications and that. So I apologize. I wasn't meaning like don't collect it at all.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, great.
Maybe.
And then like the incorporation documents, making sure that they have that, they're 990, all of that.
Yeah.
I have had readers in the past that really felt strongly about the asset balance sheet because they want to know how big is this organization? Do they have $6 million in the bank? Some reviewers value that. But if I'm feeling, we can talk more about what does the committee want and what is useful and beneficial.
Yeah, I think profits and losses is good to have in there, just having that, but I don't think we need all of that information.
Yeah, heard. I hear, thank you for that.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So is each person responsible for reading a certain number of applications or
All of them.
all of them?
Mhm.
So each person reads all of them.
Yes.
And you score all of them. So then you have the compiled scores to look at.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good question. No, thank you.
And that would be an idea maybe for the next year's funding to think about maybe having a group of us score a certain number of the applications and another group score another part of the applications to make it a little bit easier and for us to be able to spend a little bit more time and energy into each applicant's presentations and applications.
Well, Tiffany, that's a great idea. And the way that it's established now, we could have a group that does the capital projects and a group that does program, and I think you call it services, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be a natural way to break it up.
Yeah, I mean, definitely if we get a ton more applicants also, that's gonna be really hard for every person, every member of the group to score everyone. So it's definitely something to consider, absolutely.
So I'm hearing that the application is pretty good way it is, doesn't need a lot of radical cutting, but look at what we provide for supplementals and collect things, but don't necessarily need to distribute everything. As long as the city's doing the checking
Yes.
of the qualifications, validation, everybody's got the right paperwork is current.
Exactly.
Looking for any red flags with things like financials or legal issues. Okay. So are we ready to move on to the rubric?
Mhm.
Oh, the rubric.
Get used to these, Josh.
Okay, so the last item on the staff report was the rubric, and I wanted to talk about the rubric, how we scored the applications. I've heard that there's been challenges with how the rubric, you know, how useful a tool it was. Did we accomplish what we were trying to accomplish? And how we score the applications. So have heard some feedback from applicants that they were not a fan of how we addressed recusals. And that how we used an average score. So if someone has a conflict of interest, they recuse themselves. So we had 2 reviewers who had a conflict of interest and they've recused themselves. And I want to make one comment I heard was that we need to make sure we publicly recuse. So when we have a conflict of interest, that we announce our conflict of interest in the public record. And that I know we did, I think one of them was like an email to me, but we need to make sure that that's part of our record. And that we might look at a different way of scoring the averages, because typically you don't want to give an agency a 0 because you're punishing them because someone recused, right? So we took an average. So the average that the recused applicants got was a 95. We did get some feedback that there might be different ways we could look at our scoring rubric on the averages and the sums and totals and see if there's a different way we could do that. But the scores were kind of all over the board. And if you looked at how people scored, some people were very generous, some people were more conservative. I didn't see anything that seemed way out of whack to me. I don't know how you all felt, but I felt like at least the rubric gave us a way to make some determination that was written down and transparent. And we could go back to and say, here's the total, here's the average, and here's the score. Feedback on the rubric. Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you think it was cumbersome or useful? Nancy, I know you want to, Nancy left me a note. I'm not sure this rubric gets us to where we want to be.
So for me, I felt like when I handed you the packet that I'd completed the packet, but I'm not sure that I scored it the way, if I wasn't following guidelines the way I felt the need was, or the dollar should have been allocated. But I tried to meet the guidelines that were set. And I can't, it's not fair of me to give an example, because I felt like one that didn't get much funding really should have been considered more. But there was a lack of sophistication in the presentation and in the written presentation, but I thought there was merit in what they were doing. So there wasn't a way for me to represent that in the scoring sheet very well. And so even, based on the application, they got a low score on the rubric, but I felt like they deserved to have some funding. So you're shaking your head. Are you agreeing?
I wish there was some in-betweens on these scores. I don't, like a 0. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense. Like in a 0, 10, 15, like if there was like a 4 or a 6 or something like that, then it might be, because I felt like there was something in between somewhat and clearly.
Maybe have like a comment box.
Yeah, or can I write my own score in there? Or am I stuck to 0, 10, 15?
I felt like that was a guideline.
Yeah, that's how I took it, as that you could do anywhere in the range.
I did not see that in there.
Okay, so that's something we need to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
me too, because I didn't score it that way either.
Nope.
Anything 0 through 5 or 0 through
No.
15 is completely fine.
So, yeah, there was some
Nobody used decimal
miscommunication on
points,
that.
thank you. I was waiting for a 5.5.
Well, now I'm glad that I raised that because it sounds like I'm not the only one
Yes,
that
that's a great point.
was scoring them based on just the numbers given.
I think it is important to know, with the work group members too, that as long as you put that in a consistent manner across all of
Absolutely.
your applications, they're
Yeah.
the same. I think
It's true.
to your point, though, it is really good for us to, we can highlight that in a better way on the rubric here moving forward.
Thanks.
That was my only issue with the rubric.
Did we feel like 100 points was reasonable? Manageable amount? And again, you all gave great feedback on, again, to get to the equity issue, we heard from you saying,
Right.
hey, we don't wanna score people who've been previously funded, because that makes it at people who haven't gotten funded at disadvantage. So that's why it's important to get feedback ongoing and keep looking at these tools to see if there's things we wanna tweak and make it more accessible and more user friendly. Any other questions about the rubric? Okay, that concludes item number 1.
Awesome. Let me get back to our agenda. All right. Well, did we have any other? Let's see, we're on to item C.
Item number, yeah, Human Services Commission.
Oh, yes. All right. Oh, back to Michelle for item number C, 6C, Human Services Commission.
All right, thank you. I just want to get to our agenda here.
Did we do B?
That's what we just went over.
Oh, okay, yep, we did.
We want to get to the website. What's that?
It's one you're currently sharing.
I'll stop sharing and see if I can find it.
So you're looking for the website, Michelle?
Yeah,
Like the youth council one is on
That's
the
the-
tab of the website or the web browser.
okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So the last item that I had for you was the Human Services Commission. We've talked about this before, we introduced it, and we are going to talk about it again. So we talked about why we wanted to set up a permanent Human Services Commission, and we just want to introduce it and to ask you to think about making a motion to establish a permanent Human Services Commission, because we'd like to move forward to City Council in the next couple months to talk about forming that. And again, the reason why we wanted to do that is because we have all these upcoming budgetary decisions to make. So if we get funded for the grant program again, this cycle is gonna start all over. And then if we become an entitlement community, we'll have to have community oversight for that 304,000 from the federal government. So by doing this, we actually are accomplishing our work plan goal and strategy. We have 2 items that are addressed by this. And we also have our new DEIB strategic plan, which is fabulous. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, highly encourage you to do so. It's wonderful. And we have vibrant place to live. We want to increase livability, and human services is right in there. And then creating a strategic plan and the grant program that's transparent, consistent, and removes barriers. So that's what we're doing by setting up this work group. And so I'm not gonna go over all of the information and the staff report, but hopefully it's a lot of review for folks who've been involved. I did give Ilhaj an overview of how we got started, and we went over resolution 1145. We talked about how the group is set up. And then I talked about that if we do move forward with the permanent group, it would be more like a traditional commission. So we have our equity commission, our planning commission. There would be terms set up and they would be appointed for a set time. So with the staff report, we would look to the group for their feedback on how they feel about the idea of a permanent human services commission. We do
Is
have,
Jim still with us? Heard from Jim for a second, so.
No, he's been gone for a little bit.
we do have these 5 options in your staff report. You know, option number 1 was the recommended option to establish a permanent commission. Option number 2 is to not establish a permanent commission, but extend your work through 2025 so we could review the grant applications again. Option number 3 is do not recommend an ordinance to the city council. Do not recommend extending the human services. Option number 4 is to provide staff direction on other things that we haven't thought about. And then option number 5 is some other thing that we don't have on our plate right now.
I mean, I think the permanent doesn't hurt. That way there's some form of like stability and foundation for it instead of having to like change it or change people every so often and then have to teach them everything all over again.
I agree with Dahlia. Option 1 is the best.
What are you thinking of in terms of a cycle, like a 3-year cycle and rotating everybody on that?
It's typically what our advisory boards are, and so what we try to do is offset our advisory boards so that not everybody's cycle ends at the same time. To Workgroup member Martinez's point of, you know, having to bring on new people. So what we typically do is we have a half, and I know it's 7, it's, you know, maybe 3 or 4, do a 3-year term, and then the other half do a 4-year term. And then from that point on, it'd be 3-year terms, but that way they're staggered.
Right, at least there's some stability in there.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up here. This is a draft ordinance that we've got approval, from the city attorney to move forward to present this. And so this is what Shannon's talking about, the staggered terms. So the first initial term in 2025 for positions 1 and 2 and 3 would be till 2027. And then 4, 5, and 6 would be till 2028. And that's just the initial cycle. And in a lot of this language will look familiar to you all. It's similar to what was in the resolution. You know, I took some of the language and then updated things that have occurred since the work group was formed.
Well, I will say that as joining this work group here, if you had to start that process all over again, that seems definitely pretty arduous to have to like catch everyone up to speed every year, if you just keep extending the group or bringing in new people every time. But I'm also not opposed to that either, if the city would prefer to have like different voices also.
Any other thoughts? Do we want to entertain a motion?
And Chair, I don't know if that was a question.
No, I'm just saying, like, I'm
Just
saying,
happy to respond to
it's,
that too.
yeah, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, it's helpful to have this stability and
Yeah.
continuity, especially as we start getting into community development block grant dollars, because those are a lot more complex than our human services dollars. And so being able to explain that program and what are and are not eligible, you know, programs and criteria, it would be a benefit for us to have some longevity on advisory boards.
From my perspective, I feel like I'm just starting to grasp it now. So it takes a while for us to get there. So I think definitely having some time to be able to get entrenched in this work group and make it more permanent would be helpful for us to have an actual impact on the community.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Whereas if it wasn't permanent, then I'm just kind of in and out and I don't really know what I did so much as I just filled out a rubric and did the best I could with the information I was given.
Unless they don't like us and we say no.
Well, that's to be seen, but I'd be happy to move it to a motion.
Do we have enough votes?
We still have a quorum. Dahlia and Nate.
And Tiffany's there too,
Oh,
right?
Tiffany's here too, okay.
Okay,
And Juliet is here. Juliet's still here.
Oh, okay. We just don't see you on the screen. I apologize.
okay, so do I have a motion to have option one, recommend an ordinance to the city, Lacey City Council that would establish a permanent Human Services Commission to provide recommendations for human services needs, human service related policies and programs, and human service funding to include future human service grant programs and the community development block grant program.
Hi.
Do I have a motion?
I motion.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
I vote yes.
Okay, I'm gonna take a vote right now, Juliet.
So Chair, if I could, just to clarify.
Thank you.
We have a first from work group member Walker,
Yes.
and then a second from
To Nate.
to work group member Clay.
Yep.
Okay, so all in favor of making the work group permanent, option number one, say aye.
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 Hi.
All opposed? Okay, so the motion has passed. Do I need to clarify anything else?
If I could do one more clarification. Chair?
Yes,
I just want to make sure the youth council member knows that they can vote.
he did.
As well, he did. Fantastic. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Appreciate it.
I heard him. So that motion has passed. That we will recommend option one to the Lacey City Council.
All right, thank you so much. That concludes my presentation this
Okay.
evening.
Thanks, Michelle. Are there any other comments while we're here? Comments, concerns, questions? No?
I've said this before, but I would like to just acknowledge Michelle for all the hard
Yeah,
work she's
thanks,
done,
Michelle.
because we just show up and give ideas, but you put in a huge amount of effort, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you. Like I said, Shannon is a great support. She helps me out a
We
lot.
can tell.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So with that, our City of Lacey Human Services Work Group for Thursday, October 3rd, 2024 is adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye.